Widening the Circle of Concern. An introduction to the report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. At a gathering by UUA co-presidents in 2017, UU leaders of color were asked to share their insights into how the association could continue moving forward in the midst of another racially charged moment. What they heard proved the need for more study and action, such as no shared accountability structures and processes are in place to hold people accountable for the continued harm of BIPOC members and leaders. Our faith seems to have no room for repentance and saying when we have failed. The diffused nature of our organizations, each with their own accountability structures, means ignorance and aggression are experienced again and again in leadership. Too few white people are engaged in intentional anti-oppression work. We need to center the experiences of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. And much, much more.
And we therefore end our service in hope. And we thank you.
At the New Orleans General Assembly in 2017, the UUA Board of Trustees chartered the Commission on Institutional Change. The charge was to conduct an audit of the power structures and analyze systematic racism and white supremacy culture within UUism. The goals were as follows. Ground the work in theology to liberate Unitarian Universalism and become an anti-oppressive, multicultural, and accountable to the richness of our diverse heritage. Oversee an audit of racism within UU practices and policies and make recommendations for anti-oppression strategies and accountability. Collect stories of those who have experienced harm because of racism within UUA culture and identify what must be dismantled to transform the faith. Document events and practices within UUA congregations for opportunities for redress and restorative justice. Illuminate the often silent expectations placed on religious professionals who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the transformation of the faith. Identify promising practices for recruitment and retention of religious leaders that spans race, class, and age that is also reflective of an inclusive ecclesiology. The methodology was important to consider. The goal was to collect stories and data while not re-traumatizing those who had been impacted by these experiences in the past. Components included calls for testimony, focus groups, collaboration with UU leaders who were leading diversity, equity, and inclusion work, an outside audit, surveys, and research tools that analyzed all material to create qualitative data. These factors were all reviewed through a lens of centering. While proximity may not always guarantee expertise, it does guarantee experience. Centering BIPOC faith leaders means a leaning towards, a prioritizing of perspective, paying attention to whose needs are considered, and listening to who is most affected. A desire from white-identified people to collaborate, but avoid discomfort, can continue to uphold inequitable and toxic systems that also continue to hurt people of color. This must also be balanced to not put undue burden or create unequal labor dynamics for BIPOC leaders who already experience extra emotional participation in an unequal and oppressive system. After hundreds of testimonials and thousands of data points collected over 3 years, the Commission released its 196-page report in June of 2020. The recommendations were broken into these categories. Theology, governance, congregations and communities, hospitality and inclusion, living our values in the world, religious professionals, educating for liberation, innovation and risk-taking, and restoration and reparations. Altogether, there were 36 recommendations and 117 action items needed to be restorative and create long-term structural changes to provide ongoing satisfaction and guarantee the non-repetition of the harm to Black, Indigenous, and people of color within our faith. This can only be done with accountability. Accountability should be embedded in the boards of the association and affiliated professional organizations. It requires ongoing monitoring to ensure the work to counter bias and oppression is not interrupted again. It will require an ongoing independent body to monitor accountability made up of representatives from oppressed groups, and will support those responsible for managing negotiating in times of change and conflict to be trained in anti-oppressive work. To learn more about the Widening the Circle of Concern report, including accountable ways to dismantle racism in ourselves and our institutions, please visit www.uua.org/widening or use the QR code. Thank you for your commitment to the eighth principle.